Someone should use an AI to write an RPG horror story with the posts on this sub being the examples. I don't know how to do it though. If someone smarter than me wants to take my idea and work with it, I think some hilarity could ensue. Well, OP, I think you've got your wish, but like any monkey's paw, the results are rather cursed. G'day mates and fellow adventurers, my name is Mordecai. I have a confession to make. I have recently been greatly saddened as both an artist and as an enthusiast for artificial intelligence, largely because of how the new AI tech is being used. Not to mention that so-called generative AI can now be found seemingly everywhere, from your favourite search engine's results through to your computer's operating system. If you're using Windows at least, not sure what Mac is doing. Not to mention that Wizards seem to have used it for the cover of that upcoming D&D player handbook for 2024. This being despite them affirming that they won't use AI art in their final products after facing major backlash for doing so. Okay, based on the coloration, the cover is meant to depict a gold dragon from what I can tell, but it looks nothing like the gold dragon does on D&D Beyond's official website, which features the official art for a gold dragon. Speaking of, now the developers working on that upcoming remake of Age of Mythology are using AI art for the god portraits, which... look at what they did to Isis in the closed beta. That is lizard scales on human skin. And as an amateur artist, even I can tell it's supposed to be human skin because we can see the belly button right there. Excuse me? I actually recently watched this video that went over every god portrait in Age of Mythology Retold's closed beta. How has no one else noticed this particular glaring oversight? I know I mostly play Ra when I'm playing Egyptians in Age of Mythology because then I... look at this, they massacred my boy Ra with this AI nonsense. It gets even more egregious when you see him depicted as having long claw-like nails on his portrait, but then you look at the closed beta's official banner and we can clearly see that he doesn't have those there. These are the kinds of trivial mistakes and lack of cross-artwork consistency that are easily seen with AI art. I sincerely hope that they do not fix these issues with AI art, and not just because this is hilarious in retrospect, but also because I want to see more artists who do not make these kinds of trivial mistakes employed commercially. If you want a more in-depth perusal of what they've done with the art for Age of Mythology Retold, I'll link the aforementioned video in the description below. Sorry to make anyone else who was looking forward to Age of Mythology Retold feel rather bitter about this, but at least the premium version lets you use the original portraits. Ah, much better. Whilst I was editing together this video, it came to my attention that they released a trailer for Age of Mythology Retold as part of Gamescom. Here's a freeze frame of my boy Ra, and you'll notice this artwork in the trailer has been touched up to remove the overtly long nails he had in the beta art. Instead, they are now shorter claws, which is still not consistent with the closed beta banner art. But since they've now featured this predominantly AI art thing, it means that this game will be released with AI art as a feature. I would like to reiterate, I am looking forward to Age of Mythology Retold, but I know that some of us will take one look at this and decide against playing it for very good reasons. And that's some of the real cost of using AI art in commercial projects like this. Keep in mind, Adobe has also added these derivative AI tools to Photoshop as well, so that you too can experience drawing hands incorrectly at the press of a button, which only feels slightly less cursed somehow than knowing it's now on every Windows machine. Naturally, this does mean that certain jumbucks now require you to contribute to the generative AI algorithms as part of using their products, and that is all just great. Look, I try to be sarcastic there, I don't know if that comes across or not. Since I am an enthusiast for artificial intelligence, we're covering two more stories where Photoshop's integrated art atrocity regime and its neighbours are the main character. And one of these is channel exclusive due to its controversy as a story seemingly written by ChatGPT, which then resulted in the original post getting deleted. We're going full internet archaeologist on this one. Let us embark into the walkabout territories known as r/RPG horror stories. The first story we're recounting the tale of today is titled DM Makes AI Explicit Adult Art of the Party, Then Disappears, and is written by Reddit user SuspiciousCow11. For the younger people in the audience, or for anyone who wants to skip the naughty adult doing the dirty laundry, here's a timestamp to skip ahead to. For everyone else, consider this to be a trigger warning for this tale. I've played D&D for years, but I've mostly played with longtime friends, and this is my only horror story. It started last year. I had just moved to the US to start a PhD in applied maths, and was pretty lonely. The program itself was brutal, and I didn't have a lot of time for socializing, so my only friends outside of the department were thousands of miles away. At some point, I had mentioned that I played D&D to one of the other grad students, and he invited me to join his group. The group was mostly formed of people he'd met at uni. He'd done his undergrad at the same institution, so it was a mix of people in their early 20s. Aside from the two of us, there was Dave, who worked in finance, Zoe, who was a med student, and Lily, who was studying art. Now, the group was mostly great. The only relatively minor issue was Dave, our DM, who was somewhat lacking in social skills and tended to have very strong opinions about things he knew very little about. This was especially irritating when it came to something that one of the rest of us did know a lot about, as he refused to back down even when he was clearly wrong. But I'm a math student, so I'm no stranger to folks with poor people skills, and it wasn't too big a problem. I usually just tuned Dave out whenever he ranted. Anyway, we started our campaign in October. Dave had created a homebrew setting, which was fantastic and had a lot of depth to it, and Lily offered to do some artwork for it. So over the course of the next couple of months, she did character portraits, a few landscapes, and even did a painting of a few of the big battles. All of the art was really good, and it made the campaign so much better. I actually have one of the battle paintings hung up in my flat to this day. Around Thanksgiving time though, Lily's workload had picked up, so she had to stop doing the art for us. None of the rest of us had any artistic talent, unless you somehow count painting 40k miniatures, so I had to use stock pictures for new PCs. At some point though, Dave taught himself how to use Generative AI, and decided to make a bunch of new portraits for us. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of AI quote art unquote, but he'd already made them, so I accepted mine and we started using them. They were pretty cool to be fair. His software allowed picture inputs, so his portraits were recognizable as us. This will be important later. He got really into AI image creation, and he ended up making tons of pictures. With our permission, he made a Twitter account to post the pictures, which I followed and occasionally scrolled through. He posted pretty regularly, like a few new pictures every week, and it was kinda interesting to see images of us in various scenarios. Unfortunately, this wasn't the only Twitter account that he had made. There was a second account that he hadn't shared with us, featuring more questionable pictures. One of Zoe's flatmates stumbled across it whilst doing research and recognized her. He showed her the account and she showed the rest of us. It was pretty horrifying, to be honest. There were dozens of images of each of our characters in various states of undress. We decided to confront Dave at the next session. As soon as I brought up the Twitter account, he went white. After about a second, he just bolted out of the house, leaving his stuff behind. We tried to contact him, but he blocked us on everything and nuked both Twitter accounts. As far as I'm aware, he moved house shortly afterwards, although whether he left the city or just moved across the street, I have no idea. So yeah, there's probably explicit art of me floating around the internet, which is slightly horrifying to think about. And that's where this tale ends. Look, there is no other phrase to describe what the DM has done besides calling it for what it is.
Disgusting!
For those who aren't aware, a big part of the reason why the whole naughty adults doing dirty laundry is at best highly questionable is because it, at best, can easily violate consent. In other words, adult permission for dirty laundry to be involved with the game. This kind of explicit content doesn't show up at a lot of tables, thank goodness, because it makes most people, some of whom get into Dungeons & Dragons because they want to explore dungeons and fight dragons, feel uncomfortable at best. And this particular example of discomfort has now been spread across the internet by this jumbuck through the power of image search and AI tools. It's an old saying that anything on the internet is there to stay, and this jumbuck of a DM will forever be known as a horrible person. Of course, the best solution would have been for them to have never done this, but having this confrontation where they immediately fold is a mixed blessing in this case. Particularly because the disgusting, disturbing, despicable and awful damage has already been done, and in such a way that there is no easy fix. I have a lot more to say about the AI tools themselves, so these afterthoughts will get a bit long-winded. I have seen that some people don't really have a problem with generative AI art being used so long as it's strictly for personal use. For myself, I am not technically opposed to the idea of using assistive AI strictly to help with a very particular part of the creative process. More on that in a moment. After all, the idea of using an artificial assistant to assist in achieving a goal has been an idea that's been around since computers were first invented, and eventually provided the inspiration for the character Data in Star Trek. Or perhaps more notoriously, Clippy. But that's not what's happening. We're not seeing this AI analyze body proportions in an artist's work in progress to aid upcoming artists in creating new poses for their existing creatures, or to help with understanding how perspective works, which is the part I wouldn't mind the correct amount of assistance from an AI with figuring out. No, instead we're seeing Kwebbelkop completely replacing himself with a deepfake, soulless, at best parody AI that doesn't understand how humour works, and that will forever be saddening. And it does so in a way that demonstrates a massive issue, that these AI art tools are designed to be and being a commercial replacement, not a supplement. And while it could be used as a supplement, that's the exception. Keep in mind, there are also tables out there who would beg to have an actual artist do art for the characters at the table. If you have a dedicated artist at your table that you could ask to do the art, you have no reason to use AI art for the final character artwork being used. For those who have a wild imagination that they want to express, but are not necessarily the best artist, you don't need to be. Because you could commission another artist who could work in unison with you from start to end. And with an actual artist at your side, you can start learning how to get much better at art. So let's do the lightning round of my own issues with using AI art, mates. A big issue with it is that it undercuts the value of art produced by actual artists, largely through how it derives the artwork. Most artists that are commissioned today, they'll draft a sketch, apply various techniques, get feedback, perhaps do some line art before colouring and shading to produce an artwork. It's a forwards process, done step by step. The AI art instead does this backwards by examining and deriving from existing art. Which, okay, not necessarily bad. Artists will sometimes examine previous artworks by others to learn new techniques, but how the AI art learns the techniques is not by examining those techniques, but by analysing the vectors and composition of various loosely recognised shapes. Which is bad, and why even simple edits by the AI or a touch-up job can be near impossible due to this backwards creation process. We've already seen how it's affected Age of Mythology Retold and D&D. Which brings me to my last issue, that being that I found that when I was very briefly interested in seeing what it could do and how it currently works, that it was dulling my imagination by relying too much on existing works, and thus struggling with originality. Now, before everyone starts thinking that AI has no place in a commercial capacity, I do want to point out some good uses for AI in said capacity. I've recently read this article about how a research AI was used to discover a new rare earth metal-free alloy that could be used for producing powerful permanent magnets for usage in electric motors. That's awesome! How about with detecting plagiarism, or protecting against fraud? My point that I've taken way too long to get to is that AI art is a bad commercial application of AI, and is being used to do real harm in said commercial capacity. So, on that basis, let's get to another example of AI tools being evil. The second story we're recounting the tale of today is titled, "Player decides to derail the game by sidelining the party with his cheated character. No thanks to our lazy enabler of a DM." Since this post was deleted, I can't fairly credit the poster. Hey there, fellow roleplayers! I've got a story to share with you all that's sure to make your blood boil. It's about an edgy Mary Sue character who managed to derail an entire game with his cheated stats, powerful weapons, and a DM who just couldn't be bothered to do anything about it. So let's set the scene. We're in a game of D&D and the party is just starting to form. Everyone's excited to dive into the world and create their characters. But then, there's this one guy who decides to make an edgy Mary Sue character. You know the type. Overpowered, ridiculously high stats, and an arsenal of powerful weapons that would make even the most seasoned adventurer jealous. Now, I'm all for creativity and pushing the boundaries of what's possible in a game, but this guy took it to a whole new level. His characters had stats that were so high, it was like he was playing a completely different game. And let's not forget the weapons. He had everything from a magical sword that could cleave through mountains to a bow that could shoot arrows faster than the speed of sound. But here's the kicker. This guy didn't have any session logs to back up the legitimacy of his character's wealth of power. He just showed up one day with a character sheet that looked like it had been written by a god, and expected everyone to just accept it. Hang on, session logs and not notes? And why is a brand new player to the table expected to have notes on everything that has happened in prior sessions to the character's introduction to the party? Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself, because this directly contradicts what was just said earlier about the party just starting to form. Now, I've partaken in a few tables as a guest character for a few sessions, and whilst I was primed on the world lore and occasionally some of the party's more famous exploits, so that I could make a character that fits right in with the party, I never had session notes from prior sessions in which I didn't participate. Really, this is one of those sticking points that indicates that something isn't right with the story, particularly how it was written, as though it's been written by ChatGPT. There's also more to the tale than what's written in the post, which I'll cover in my afterthoughts, but let's keep going. Of course, the rest of the party was understandably upset. They had spent hours crafting their characters, making sure they were balanced and fit within the world, but now they were being overshadowed by this edgy Mary Sue who could single-handedly take down entire armies. And the worst part? The DM just sat back and let it happen. He didn't do anything to rein in the cheater or balance the game. Instead, he just shrugged his shoulders and said, well, that's just how the dice rolled. As you can imagine, this led to a lot of frustration and tension within the group. The edgy Mary Sue character continued to dominate the game, sidelining the rest of the team and derailing the plot. The DM, meanwhile, remained stubbornly passive, refusing to take any action to address the imbalance. In the end, the game fell apart. The rest of the party lost interest and stopped showing up, leaving the edgy Mary Sue and the lazy DM to play their own little game of who's the most powerful. So, what's the moral of the story? Well, for one, don't be that guy who creates an edgy Mary Sue character and expect everyone to just accept it. And for another, don't be a lazy DM who lets cheaters run rampant in your game. Remember, role-playing games are all about collaboration, balance, and having fun. If you're not willing to put in the effort to make sure everyone is having a good time, then maybe it's time to find a new hobby. Thanks for reading, and happy gaming! And that's where the tale ends. Yeah, in case anyone was wondering, we have pretty definitive proof that this story was, unfortunately, likely written by an AI. A lot of people on Reddit were pretty quick to point out some of the obvious issues, such as there being no description of a standout scene of the problem player stealing the spotlight with their character, the descriptions that we do have being not really detailed, and there being no nuance or sense of nuance to name a few. But for me, I found several subtle signs that this was written by an AI to be more fascinating. For me, there's 3 subtle signs that this story was artificially written. Despite getting a few things debatably incorrect, such as logs instead of notes, when I was reading the replies to the post by the OP, I couldn't help but notice that OP had a very different style of writing between the post and their replies. The post being largely grammatically flawless, but the replies having grammar issues and random capitalization of letters is a red flag to be sure. Perhaps that is a minor issue when the tale itself is somewhat derivative and generic of other stories where a newcomer upsets the existing balance, which results in the story feeling more like it's summarizing the general structure of those other stories. Plus, some of those replies add details to the story that should have been present in the original post. We'll cover those extra details in a moment. Perhaps this is nitpicky as all get out, but one of OP's replies also revealed that they were insecure about their writing coming across as though it were written by a robot. So, at best what we have here is this young bloke who has used an AI to write up a story summarizing in extremely vague terms their experience with this one guy whom usurped the table. Usually a deleted post of this nature is an indication that the story is fake. Plus, not going back and editing in those details to the post could be considered a mixed flag. But I can't dismiss the possibility that the comments left behind by the OP allude to a tale that may have happened, at least going by the details that were added in those replies. One in which a sweet but naive grandmother asks their grandson to go out on one of the most noble of quests, socializing with other people through Dungeons and Dragons, a hobby that centers around social interaction with other people. And the end result is the OP being in a position where they have to see this game collapse with no solution seeming to be in sight of the other players besides the problem guy and the GM. And that's the story that we should be reading, not this AI slop. That's the tale implied by some of OP's replies as extra details. I normally like to present my solutions to these conundrums unless a satisfying solution has already been enacted by OP and their friends. But I have to split my solutions here because there are now two different scenarios, because I like to have these videos cover everything a tale presents, if possible. My first solution is that you shouldn't use ChatGPT or an AI tool to write your story for you. If nothing else, see it as a way to get better at writing. But the second solution, assuming that the story is true in its entirety, is that OP should talk to their grandma about trying to find a different group to play D&D with. And that's where I'll wrap up this video talking about the AI horrors of Reddit. And I suspect we're just scratching the surface on this. Thanks mates for watching the video. If you like my content and want to see more or wish to support the channel, please hit the subscribe button and maybe leave the video a like. It's free to do, and every bit of support is highly appreciated, and gets us closer to that mystical 1,000 subscriber milestone. Again, thanks for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Wait a minute, does that mean that Clippy is the source of inspiration for this particular AI paradigm? Both Copilot and Clippy have the same starting letter, they share several characters, and both are developed by Microsoft. I don't think that's a coincidence. I still get nightmares sometimes about Clippy passive-aggressively trying to correct my grammar when it was grammatically flawless according to English teachers at school. Uh-oh.